Okay, in this sketch, we're looking at a book called The Christian Imagination, Theology of Origins of Race by Wiillie James Jennings. Now, Wiillie Jennings is Associate Professor of Theology and Black Church Studies at Duke Divinity School, and he has served as the dean for a while, and his background is that he started off, he's from Grand Rapids, Michigan. He got his undergraduate at Calvin College, his MDiv at Fuller Seminary in California, and his PhD at Duke University, which is where he currently teaches. All right, so Jennings' book can be divided into three basic sections, and he uses three key words. The first word is displacement, and what's cool about this book is that he goes through and he uses historical figures that aren't always and often talked about in our theology and history, church history. And under displacement, he talks about Acosta and how he went to Peru and the colonialization of the Incas. And so he talks about displacement. The second word that he uses is translation. And he talks primarily about a missionary named Colenso, Bishop Colenso, and that was a missionary to the Zulu tribe in Africa. And then displacement and translation, where he's trying to talk about the mistake of Western Christianity. The mistake that he talks about is that Western European Christianity understood its way of knowing God and whiteness as reality itself, as wide as its own horizon. And he's exposing this. And then the third word, the word that where he tries to make a move toward correcting the mistake, is the word joining. So we've got displacement, translation, and joining. So I just want to sketch out Jennings' basic idea. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is create this circle here. And we're talking about humans' relationship to land. And what Jennings is arguing is that the Western European Christianity is built upon an Aristotelian idea of perfection being up and the place that we're trying to get to. And it evolved into this idea of race, where the whiteness was perfection and blackness was lostness, essentially. And so the whole human endeavor, was to become more white, more perfect, more Christian. And this is what dominated the imagination of the West and Christianity, which led to colonialism. And this is to be in contrast to the indigenes, the native people of the land, who saw themselves in interconnectedness with the land and this idea of place. So what happened during colonialism is that this Western idea of self and autonomy and individualism came and displaced the indigenes. And then they had this idea that you could take the land and separate it into little squares, and that each individual self could own property. And this is a total idea of displacement. And this is what Jennings says is captured in the story of Acosta. And then Jennings turns to the story of Colenso, who was a missionary to Africa, to the Zulus. And he believed that there was a God essence that was present in every culture, and that the job of the missionary was to translate and find the God essence there and translate scripture into this, which led to this idea of universalism, that there was a universal presence of God that just needs to be found in each culture. But the problem is that universalism was still translated through this Western whiteness idea of God, which became then just furthering colonialism. And so what Jennings, in his last part of his book, what he tries to do is to show that the answer to this is to expose the whiteness, first of all, and then to go back to the idea of Israel, and that God's relationship to Israel was to stand between Israel and the land, and then that Israel was ultimately fulfilled in the body of Jesus, and that in every land there is this idea that we have to come to Jesus to be transformed by Jesus, and he calls this a joining. Now, my own contribution to this is I see that Jennings is very Christocentric in this, which is awesome. But the very joining that he talks about, I think, is essence of the Spirit, which leads toward a Trinitarianism. That would really help flesh out Jennings' argument and make it more robust.